Officer Raymond Bennett aggressively slams handcuffs on Dr. Amara Johnson in the courtroom, snarling racial slurs while dragging her toward the exit. The judge's gavel crashes down. "Officer Bennett, release her immediately. That's your new police. Chief, you're assaulting." Before we dive deeper into this shocking story, where are you watching from today? Hit that like button if you've ever witnessed injustice, and subscribe to follow Amara's journey from victim to champion of change. Will she transform a corrupt system, or will the system destroy her? Let's find out. Dr. Amara Johnson stood at the window of the mayor's office, gazing out at Westlake City's skyline. The weight of the badge in her hand felt both foreign and familiar. After 15 years with the FBI specializing in police reform and civil rights violations, she was now about to make history as the first black female police chief in Westlake's 200-year existence. The city council vote was unanimous, Mayor Wilson said, interrupting her thoughts. "Though I suspect a few were just saving face rather than genuinely supporting your appointment." Amara turned and studied the mayor's face. Jerome Wilson, a moderate Republican who had surprisingly championed police accountability after a series of scandals rocked the department. His silver hair and tailored suit projected authority, but the shadows under his eyes revealed the toll of recent controversies. "Let's speak frankly," Wilson continued, lowering his voice though they were alone. "The department has a troubling pattern of racial incidents. 6 excessive force complaints in the past year alone, all involving minority citizens. 2 wrongful deaths settled out of court with confidentiality agreements. Internal affairs investigations that mysteriously dissolve before completion." Amara nodded, having reviewed the files thoroughly before accepting the position. "The issues are systemic. Cultural transformation won't happen overnight." "That's precisely why we need you," Wilson replied. "Your work at the FBI dismantling corrupt departments in Baltimore and Chicago made you the ideal candidate. Westlake isn't as big, but the problems are just as entrenched." Amara placed the badge on the desk between them. "Before I officially take command, I'd like a week of observation. Undercover." The mayor's eyebrows rose. "Undercover? That's unconventional. I need to see the authentic department culture, not the polished version they'll present to their new chief," Amara explained. "Officers behave differently when they know they're being watched." Wilson considered this. "It could work. Your official introduction isn't scheduled until next Monday. Until then, very few people know what you look like." Amara hadn't shared with the mayor her personal motivation. 20 years ago, her brother Marcus had been wrongfully arrested in a similar suburban department. The responding officers had claimed he matched the description of a robbery suspect, the description being nothing more specific than young black male. Marcus had spent 3 nights in jail and suffered a broken rib before the actual perpetrator was caught. The incident had altered the trajectory of her life, fueling her determination to create change from within the justice system. "There's something else you should know," Wilson added. "The police union isn't happy. Curtis Miller, the union representative, has been quietly organizing resistance to your appointment. They're concerned about your reputation for accountability." "Let me guess," Amara said dryly. "They're worried about officer morale and outside interference in department traditions." Wilson nodded. "Those exact phrases, actually. One officer in particular concerns me, Raymond Bennett. He's something of an unofficial enforcer within the department. 20 years on the force, decorated multiple times, but with a personnel file full of excessive force complaints that somehow never stick." "All against minorities?" Amara asked, though she already knew the answer. "Every single one," Wilson confirmed. "He's untouchable because he knows where all the bodies are buried, metaphorically speaking. At least I hope metaphorically." Amara made a mental note to review Bennett's file more thoroughly. "I'd like to observe some court proceedings this week. See how officers interact with the public, judges, and defendants." "That's a good place to start," Wilson agreed. "Officers tend to be on better behavior in court, but still, you might notice patterns." "I'll dress casually. No identification," Amara decided. "Just another citizen observing the justice system at work." As she left City Hall, Amara felt a familiar tension between hope and pragmatism. Real change required disrupting entrenched systems of power, and those who benefited from those systems rarely surrendered their advantages willingly. But if she could transform this department, it could become a model for others across the country. What she couldn't know was that her observation period would end far sooner and more dramatically than she had planned. The Westlake Municipal Court building stood as a monument to justice, at least in architectural terms. Its imposing columns and broad marble steps projected authority and impartiality. Yet during her 3 days of observation, Amara had documented disturbing patterns that told a different story about how justice functioned inside. On this third morning, dressed in jeans, a simple blouse, and with her natural hair unstraightened, Amara blended perfectly with the other citizens navigating the system. She carried a worn leather notebook where she'd been documenting her observations in shorthand developed during her FBI days. The patterns were unmistakable. White defendants received respectful sir and ma'am addresses from officers, while black defendants were referred to by last name only. Latino defendants frequently had no translators despite clear language barriers. Bail recommendations showed dramatic disparities based on race rather than criminal history or flight risk. Most concerning was Officer Raymond Bennett, whom she'd now observed for 2 consecutive days. She'd recognized him immediately from his personnel photographs. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a military crew cut and a perpetual expression of contempt. When interacting with white defendants, Bennett maintained rigid professionalism. When handling minorities, his body language transformed, standing too close, hand resting on his weapon, voice dropping to a threatening growl. This morning, a young black man named Deshaun Morris stood before Judge Eleanor Martinez, charged with possessing marijuana, less than an ounce found during a questionable traffic stop. In a state where recreational marijuana was now legal, Morris was facing charges because the substance had been discovered within 1,000 feet of a school zone, a technical violation carrying mandatory minimum sentencing. Your Honor, Mr. Morris has no prior record, the public defender was arguing. He's a full-time student with a part-time job supporting his mother. This charge could cost him his scholarship. Bennett, who had made the arrest, stood with his arms crossed, occasionally whispering to the district attorney. When Judge Martinez asked for the officer's statement, Bennett stepped forward. The defendant was uncooperative during the stop, making suspicious movements and refusing to maintain eye contact. Based on my 15 years of experience, these are indicators of criminal intent. Amara's pen moved rapidly across her notebook. The language was textbook racial profiling cloaked in acceptable legal terminology. Morris had likely been stopped for driving while black, and his completely normal nervousness around police had been weaponized as evidence against him. Just then, Bennett's gaze swept across the courtroom and locked onto Amara. His eyes narrowed as he noticed her taking notes. She maintained her focus on her notebook, but she could feel his attention lingering on her. When the judge called a 15-minute recess, Amara remained seated, reviewing her notes. She didn't notice Bennett approaching until his shadow fell across her notebook. "What are you writing there?" he demanded, his tone carrying the automatic authority of someone unused to being questioned. Amara looked up calmly. "Court proceedings are public record. Citizens have the right to observe and take notes." Bennett's jaw tightened. "Let me see some identification." "Am I being detained, Officer Bennett?" Amara asked, using his name deliberately. "Or am I free to go?" A flash of surprise crossed his face at her knowledge of his name, quickly replaced by suspicion. "How do you know who I am?" "Your name was called during proceedings," Amara replied evenly, though she'd recognized him days earlier. "Again, am I being detained?" "You look suspicious," Bennett stated, his hand moving to rest on his weapon. "Several burglaries have been reported in this area. I need to see identification now." Amara recognized the tactic, a fishing expedition with no legal basis. "I'm exercising my constitutional right to observe court proceedings, which requires no identification. Unless you have reasonable suspicion that I've committed a specific crime, this conversation is over." Bennett's face flushed. "I determine what's suspicious. Stand up, hands where I can see them." Several people were watching now. Amara weighed her options. She could identify herself as the incoming police chief, but that would end her observation, period, and potentially push problematic behaviors underground rather than exposing them. I decline. I've committed no crime, she stated firmly, remaining seated. Bennett reached for his radio. I need backup in courtroom 3. Potential security threat. Officer, this is inappropriate, Amara said, her voice steady, but carrying enough to be heard by nearby observers. Some had begun recording with their phones. Bennett grabbed her arm, yanking her to her feet. Hands behind your back, now. Take your hands off me, Amara commanded, her training allowing her to maintain composure despite the escalation. Got another one thinking she knows the law, Bennett snarled, his grip tightening painfully. You people always resist, then cry discrimination. The racial subtext became explicit, as Bennett roughly spun her around and slammed handcuffs on her wrists. He continued his tirade, lowering his voice but not enough to prevent nearby observers from hearing. Probably another activist trying to make good officers look bad. We know your game. Amara remained silent as he began marching her toward the exit, aware that any resistance would be used to justify his actions. The cold metal of the handcuffs bit into her wrists. He'd applied them too tightly, a common intimidation tactic. Just as they reached the courtroom doors, Judge Martinez returned through her private entrance. The judge glanced up from her papers, eyes widening at the scene. Officer Bennett, what is the meaning of this? Judge Martinez demanded. Security concern, Your Honor. This woman was documenting court procedures and refused to identify herself, Bennett replied, his tone shifting to professional deference for the judge. Judge Martinez studied Amara's face, her expression shifting from confusion to shock as recognition dawned. The judge had been present at Amara's confidential interview with the Judicial Committee just 2 weeks earlier. Officer Bennett, release her immediately. Judge Martinez's gavel crashed down. That's your new police chief you're assaulting. The courtroom fell silent. Bennett's grip went slack, and Amara turned to face him, her expression composed despite the circumstances. Dr. Amara Johnson, FBI Special Agent and incoming Chief of Police for Westlake City, she stated for the benefit of the now silent room. I believe these are yours, Officer Bennett. She turned, offering the still open handcuffs back to him. Bennett's face drained of color. There must be some mistake. The only mistake was your assumption that you could violate a citizen's civil rights based on racial profiling, Judge Martinez stated, her voice tight with controlled anger. Dr. Johnson, please accept the court's profound apologies for this incident. Amara nodded toward the judge. No apologies necessary, Your Honor. This has been informative. Bennett began stammering explanations. Chief Johnson, if I had known, I was only following protocol for suspicious persons. We'll discuss protocols extensively on Monday, Officer Bennett, Amara replied, her voice calm, but with an undercurrent of steel. I'm particularly interested in how you determine which persons qualify as suspicious. The young man whose case had been interrupted, Deshaun Morris, was watching the scene unfold with barely contained satisfaction, momentarily forgotten by the officer who had been so eager to see him imprisoned moments before. As murmurs spread through the courtroom, Amara met Bennett's eyes directly. I'll see you first thing Monday morning, my office, 8 a.m. sharp. The heavy oak doors of the courthouse hadn't even closed behind Amara when the weight of what had just occurred settled fully upon her shoulders. She maintained her composure, walking steadily down the marble steps despite the curious stares from people entering and exiting the building. Her wrists still bore the reddened impressions of Bennett's handcuffs, a physical reminder of what countless citizens had experienced without the protection of rank or title. Her phone began vibrating, insistently in her pocket. A cascade of messages and calls that suggested news of the incident was already spreading. She ignored them for the moment, needing space to process before formulating her response. A breathless court clerk caught up with her at the bottom of the steps. Chief Johnson, Judge Martinez would like to speak with you in her chambers if you have a moment. Amara considered declining but recognized an important potential ally. Of course. 20 minutes later, she sat across from Judge Eleanor Martinez, a stern woman in her 60s with silver-streaked black hair and a reputation for running the tightest courtroom in the district. "I've filed a formal complaint about Officer Bennett's conduct," Martinez began without preamble. "His behavior was inexcusable regardless of who you were. The fact that he assaulted the incoming police chief simply compounds the severity." "Thank you, Your Honor," Amara replied. "Though I suspect had I been any other black woman, this incident would have ended very differently." The judge nodded grimly. "Precisely why I wanted to speak with you. This wasn't an isolated incident. Bennett has displayed increasingly concerning behavior in my courtroom over the past year." She slid a folder across her desk. "These are my personal notes documenting patterns of differential treatment toward defendants based on race. I've hesitated to come forward formally because previous complaints have mysteriously disappeared." Amara accepted the folder, adding it to her growing mental catalog of the department's dysfunction. "Your documentation will be invaluable to the reforms I intend to implement." "You should be prepared," Martinez warned. "The thin blue line is particularly thick in Westlake. Bennett has powerful allies, including some on the bench who may not share my concerns about his conduct." Before Amara could respond, her phone buzzed again. Mayor Wilson's third call in the past 30 minutes. "I should take this," she apologized. "Go," Martinez nodded. "And Chief Johnson, watch your back. Today won't be forgotten, by either side." 45 minutes later, Amara sat in an emergency meeting with Mayor Wilson and City Attorney Paula Reeves, a sharp-featured woman whose expression suggested she was calculating potential litigation costs rather than moral implications. "This is a disaster," Wilson paced the length of his office. "And an opportunity," he added quickly, seeing Amara's expression. "I mean, it validates exactly why we hired you, but the optics are challenging." "The optics?" Amara repeated coolly. "The situation requires careful handling," Reeves interjected. "Officer Bennett has served the department for 20 years. He has supporters throughout city government and the community. He also has a pattern of racial profiling and excessive force," Amara countered, setting Judge Martinez's folder on the table alongside her own notes. "This incident merely confirms what these documents already suggest." Wilson glanced nervously at the folders but didn't open them. "Several council members have already called. Some are suggesting we should resolve this discreetly." "By discreetly, you mean sweep it under the rug," Amara said flatly. "We're simply suggesting a measured response," Reeves clarified. "Perhaps a private reprimand, sensitivity training." "Officer Bennett publicly handcuffed and attempted to arrest a citizen for exercising her constitutional rights," Amara stated. "The fact that the citizen happened to be me is irrelevant to the fundamental abuse of power." Wilson's phone chimed with yet another message. "Channel 8 is asking for comment. The story's already getting traction." "Good," Amara said decisively. "Transparency will be a cornerstone of my administration. I plan to proceed with my original strategy, but accelerated. Bennett will face the same accountability processes that any officer would under my leadership. The police union will fight this," Reeves warned. "Curtis Miller has already requested a meeting." "I look forward to it," Amara replied, though she recognized the difficult path ahead. Back at her temporary apartment that evening, Amara finally had a moment alone to contemplate the day's events. Her phone contained 37 missed calls, including several from her brother Marcus. When she returned his call, his voice carried equal measures of concern and grim vindication. "I just saw the news. Are you okay?" "I'm fine," she assured him, though it brought back memories of my arrest, Marcus stated rather than asked. It wasn't a question. The parallels were obvious. "Except you had a badge to protect you. I had nothing." The weight of his words hung between them. Despite her years in law enforcement, the fundamental truth remained. Her brother had faced the system as a powerless citizen, while she had fought it from within, with all the protection her credentials provided. "This is why I took this job," Amara said softly. "Nothing's changed in 20 years, but now I have the authority to implement real reforms." "Be careful," Marcus warned. "Systems protect themselves. The more you push, the harder they'll push back." His warning seemed prophetic when Amara found an unmarked envelope that had been slid under her door sometime during the evening. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a printed message: "Westlake doesn't need outside agitators. Resign while you can." Amara photographed the note before carefully placing it in an evidence bag from her FBI days. The threat would join her growing file of documentation, while part of her felt a tremor of unease. The larger part, the part that had faced down corrupt officials and criminal organizations throughout her career, felt a grim determination solidifying. That night, she reviewed Bennett's complete personnel file, obtained through her access as incoming chief. What emerged was the portrait of a man who had operated with impunity for 2 decades, protected by a system designed to shield its own regardless of conduct. As she finally prepared for bed, her phone chimed with a message from an unknown number. "Not all of us are like Bennett. Some of us want change too." Amara stared at the cryptic message, wondering if it represented a potential ally within the department or merely a trap. Either way, Monday's confrontation with Bennett would set the tone for everything that followed. What would you do if you were in Amara's position after being wrongfully detained? Comment number 1 if you believe she should make an example of Bennett immediately, or number 2 if you think a more strategic approach would be better. Like this video if you've ever witnessed or experienced racial profiling, and subscribe to see how Amara handles this explosive situation. The most difficult part of her journey is just beginning. Will she transform the department, or will entrenched corruption destroy her efforts? Keep watching to find out. Monday morning arrived with a tense electricity charging the air of Westlake Police Headquarters. Amara arrived at 7 a.m., a full hour before her scheduled meeting with Bennett, and 2 hours before her official introduction to the department. She wanted time to observe the building's physical layout and energy, without the formality of her new position immediately coloring interactions. The 4-story brick building had been constructed in the 1970s, with few updates since then. The outdated infrastructure mirrored the outdated thinking she'd already encountered. Flickering fluorescent lights illuminated dingy hallways lined with faded commendations and officer portraits, an unintentional visual history of the department's lack of diversity throughout the decades. Amara had chosen her attire carefully. A sharply tailored navy suit with minimal jewelry and practical shoes she could run in if necessary. She carried her FBI badge out of habit, though today she would exchange it for the Westlake Chief's shield. Her service weapon rested in its holster, a reassuring weight given the threatening note from the previous evening. At her temporary office door, she found a middle-aged white man with salt and pepper hair waiting, a folder clutched in his hands. "Chief Johnson?" he asked, extending his hand. "Detective James Roberts, Homicide Division. I wanted to introduce myself before the circus begins." Amara shook his hand, assessing him quickly. His grip was firm but not domineering, his expression open but cautious. "Nice to meet you, Detective. I wasn't expecting visitors quite this early." "Wanted to catch you before the battle lines get drawn," Roberts replied, glancing over his shoulder, though the hallway was empty. "After what happened at the courthouse, well, people are choosing sides." Amara unlocked her office door, motioning for him to follow. "And which side have you chosen, Detective Roberts?" Once inside with the door closed, Roberts placed his folder on her desk. "These are arrest statistics for the past 5 years, broken down by race, offense, and officer. The official reports are sanitized before they reach City Hall. These are the raw numbers." Amara raised an eyebrow, opening the folder to scan its contents. The disparities were stark, and far worse than the official data had suggested. "Why are you bringing me this?" she asked directly. Robert sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "My daughter married a black man 3 years ago. My grandchildren are biracial. I've seen how differently my son-in-law is treated by some of my colleagues. When they don't realize his connection to me, it changes your perspective." Amara studied him for another moment before nodding. "Thank you, Detective. This will be helpful." "There are others who feel the same way," Roberts added. "Not everyone is happy with how things have been run. We're just careful about speaking up." "Because of the consequences?" "Last guy who filed a complaint about excessive force found his backup mysteriously delayed during a high-risk warrant service. Nearly got killed." Roberts moved toward the door. "Bennett's scheduled to meet you at 8. Rumor has it he's been in closed-door sessions with Union Rep Miller all weekend preparing a strategy." After Roberts departed, Amara reviewed his folder while keeping one eye on the clock. At precisely 7:58 a.m., a sharp knock sounded at her door. "Enter," she called. Raymond Bennett stepped inside, his uniform pressed to military precision, his expression a neutral mask that didn't quite hide the tension in his jaw. Behind him came a shorter, stockier man with a receding hairline, whom Amara recognized from photographs as Curtis Miller, the police union representative. "I wasn't aware this meeting would include union representation," Amara observed calmly. "Officer Bennett is entitled to representation during any discussion of potential disciplinary action," Miller stated, his tone suggesting he was reciting legal language he'd rehearsed. As his union representative, Amara raised a hand, cutting him off. "Let me clarify the purpose of this meeting. I requested Officer Bennett's presence to discuss departmental protocols and my expectations moving forward. This is not a disciplinary proceeding. Yet." Bennett and Miller exchanged glances. "However," Amara continued, "since you're here, Mr. Miller, I'm happy to have you join our conversation about the department's future direction." She gestured to the chairs across from her desk. Both men sat stiffly, Bennett's eyes fixed at a point over Amara's shoulder in classic military posture. "Officer Bennett," Amara began, "I've reviewed your personnel file extensively. 20 years of service, decorated multiple times for bravery. You also have 17 excessive force complaints, all filed by minority citizens, none of which resulted in disciplinary action." Bennett's gaze finally met hers. "Those complaints were investigated and found to be without merit." "Were they investigated? Or were they dismissed?" Amara countered. "Because the documentation I'm seeing suggests the latter." "Chief Johnson," Miller interjected, "many suspects file frivolous complaints hoping to undermine legitimate arrests. Officer Bennett works in high-crime areas where resistant suspects are common. I'm well aware of that possibility, Mr. Miller. I've been in law enforcement for 15 years. Amara turned her attention back to Bennett. "Let's discuss what happened at the courthouse. Walk me through your decision-making process that led to detaining a civilian observer taking notes during a public proceeding." Bennett shifted in his chair. "I observed suspicious behavior consistent with potential security threats. The subject was documenting officer movements and court security protocols. When questioned, she became evasive and refused to identify herself." "You mean I asserted my constitutional rights?" Amara corrected. "Rights which you, as an officer sworn to uphold the Constitution, should have respected." "With all due respect, Chief," Bennett replied, a slight emphasis on her title suggesting he questioned its legitimacy. "In today's security environment, protocols sometimes require temporary restrictions of—" "Officer Bennett," Amara interrupted, "do you apply these security protocols equally to all citizens, regardless of race?" The question hung in the air. Bennett's face flushed slightly. "I enforce the law without consideration of race." "Your record suggests otherwise," Amara stated flatly. "From this moment forward, understand this. Every officer in this department will be held to the highest standards of constitutional policing. Body cameras will be worn and activated according to policy without exception. Complaints will be thoroughly investigated by an independent review board. Patterns of problematic behavior will be addressed promptly." Miller leaned forward. "Chief Johnson, while your intentions may be admirable, some of these approaches contradict established union agreements. Any changes to disciplinary procedures must be negotiated." "Mr. Miller, I'm not here to negotiate constitutional policing," Amara replied firmly. "I am, however, placing Officer Bennett on paid administrative leave pending a full investigation of Friday's incident." "That's outrageous," Miller sputtered. He was performing his duties as he understood them. If his understanding of his duties includes racial profiling and excessive force, that only underscores the need for the comprehensive reforms I'll be announcing today, Amara stated. "Officer Bennett, please surrender your badge and service. Weapon to Captain Williams at the front desk. You'll be contacted regarding next steps in the investigation." Bennett rose slowly, his expression carefully controlled. "This isn't over." "On that point, Officer Bennett, we completely agree," Amara replied evenly. "This is just the beginning." After they departed, Amara took a moment to center herself before her department-wide address. She knew the incident with Bennett was already departmental knowledge, which would make this introduction even more charged than it would have been otherwise. At 9 p.m. sharp, Amara stood before the assembled officers and staff of the Westlake Police Department in the briefing room. The energy was palpable. Curiosity, resentment, and uncertainty radiating from the rows of predominantly white male faces. She noted which officers met her gaze directly and which avoided eye contact, mentally cataloging potential allies and opponents. "Good morning," she began, her voice carrying easily across the silent room. "I'm Dr. Amara Johnson, your new chief of police. Some of you may have already heard about my unconventional introduction to Officer Bennett at the courthouse on Friday." A few uncomfortable chuckles rippled through the room, quickly silenced. "I want to address that incident directly, as it encapsulates both the challenges and opportunities facing this department. When Officer Bennett detained me for observing a public proceeding, something every citizen has the constitutional right to do, he demonstrated exactly why I was hired." She paused, letting the words settle. "The data is clear. Minority citizens in Westlake are stopped more frequently, searched more extensively, charged more aggressively, and treated more harshly than white citizens committing identical infractions. This isn't about individual racism. It's about systemic practices that have been normalized over decades." Murmurs rose from several corners of the room. Amara noted Detective Roberts sitting near the back, his expression supportive, but wary. "Today marks the beginning of comprehensive reforms," she continued. "Every officer will complete updated training on constitutional policing and implicit bias. Body cameras will be mandatory and reviewed regularly. Use of force incidents will receive thorough independent review. Community oversight will be implemented with teeth, not as a symbolic gesture." Several officers shifted uncomfortably. One raised his hand, a younger patrol officer with a dubious expression. "Officer?" Amara acknowledged him. "With all due respect, Chief, these policies sound like they're designed to hamstring officers and benefit criminals," he stated, several heads nodding in agreement around him. "On the contrary, Officer Peterson, ma'am, Patrol Division." "Officer Peterson, these policies are designed to protect both citizens and officers. When policing is perceived as fair and constitutional, community cooperation increases. When community cooperation increases, crime clearance rates improve. When we have video evidence of proper procedure, false complaints can be dismissed immediately. These reforms protect everyone in this room who is committed to ethical policing." She let the implied distinction hang in the air. Those who cannot or will not adapt to constitutional policing standards should consider career alternatives now. For everyone else, I look forward to building a department that can become a national model for effective, equitable law enforcement. As the meeting dispersed, Amara noticed clear divisions forming. Small clusters of officers whispering among themselves, some shooting glances her way that ranged from hopeful to hostile. The battle lines were being drawn exactly as Roberts had predicted. Throughout that first week, Amara began implementing her reform plan while facing mounting resistance. Miller organized informal meetings with officers, emphasizing the union's opposition to excessive oversight. Call response times mysteriously increased in certain neighborhoods. Equipment requests from officers who expressed support for reforms faced delays. By Friday, Amara discovered evidence of a coordinated work slowdown when Officer Tanya Williams, one of the few black female officers on the force, privately showed her altered patrol assignments that concentrated supportive officers in high-crime areas with reduced backup. That evening, as Amara worked late reviewing body cam audit procedures, she heard a soft knock on her office door. Detective Roberts entered, his expression grave. "You need to see this," he said, placing his laptop before her. The screen showed security footage from the records room, where a figure was clearly removing files from a cabinet, scanning them quickly, and replacing them with slightly altered versions. "That's Miller," Amara observed. "What's he accessing?" "Personnel files for officers who've had complaints filed against them," Roberts explained, including Bennett's complete history. I think they're sanitizing records before your review team gets to them. Amara leaned back, processing this new information. Thank you, Detective. This stays between us for now. I need to establish a secure evidence chain before moving on this. After Roberts left, Amara locked her office and began methodically photographing the documents she'd accumulated that week. Judge Martinez's notes, Detective Roberts' statistics, the threatening note from her apartment, and her own courthouse observations. She encrypted the files and sent them to her personal secure server, a habit from her FBI days that had proven valuable during previous investigations of corrupt departments. As she finally prepared to leave around midnight, she discovered her office door had been expertly jimmied, nearly imperceptibly, but the slight scratches around the lock were evident to her trained eye. Nothing appeared disturbed, but when she checked her desk, she found that her reform implementation timeline had been accessed and photographed. The papers were aligned slightly differently than she had left them. The message was clear. She was being watched, and there were few places within the department she could consider secure. The following Tuesday morning, Officer Tanya Williams arrived at roll call to discover her patrol car had suffered a mysterious brake line failure during routine maintenance. The incident report cited wear and tear as the cause, despite the vehicle having received a complete brake system replacement just 3 weeks earlier. Williams wasn't the only one experiencing accidents. Officers Rodriguez and Chen, who had openly supported Amara's community engagement initiatives, found their radio equipment intermittently malfunctioning during high-risk calls. Their backup requests occasionally disappeared from the dispatch system, creating dangerous delays that could easily be attributed to technical glitches rather than deliberate sabotage. Amara documented each incident meticulously, building a pattern that was becoming increasingly difficult to dismiss as coincidence. When Detective Roberts requested to meet her off-site at a small coffee shop 10 miles outside Westlake, she recognized the significance of his precaution. "I've been doing some quiet digging," Roberts began once they were seated in a corner booth, both facing the entrance. "There's an informal group within the department that calls themselves the Old Guard. They've been operating for years, ensuring certain officers are protected regardless of conduct." "How formalized is this group?" Amara asked, her coffee untouched. "No official meetings or membership cards," Roberts replied dryly. "But they have a clear hierarchy and communication system. Bennett is one of their enforcers, but not the leader. Miller coordinates, but I suspect he takes orders from someone with more authority. Any names come to mind?" Roberts glanced around before lowering his voice further. "Deputy Chief Thomas has been with the department 30 years. Nothing happens without his knowledge. And he has connections throughout the county, judges, prosecutors, council members." Amara nodded thoughtfully. Deputy Chief William Thomas had been suspiciously cooperative since her arrival, offering effusive support for reforms, while subtly suggesting delays and modifications that would render them toothless. "There's something else," Roberts continued. "Bennett's been making the rounds on local radio shows, portraying himself as the victim of a woke political agenda. He's claiming you targeted him because he's a decorated officer who tells it like it is, instead of being politically correct." "Predictable," Amara responded. "Anything else I should know?" "Several city council members with ties to the police union are planning to challenge your budget proposals. They'll claim to support reforms in principle while denying the funding necessary to implement them." As they left the coffee shop separately, Amara's phone rang with a call from her brother Marcus. "Someone just parked outside my house for 20 minutes, he said without preamble. "Police cruiser unmarked, but I recognized the model. They didn't approach, just sat there watching." "Amara, what the hell is going on?" Her blood ran cold. "Did you get a plate number?" "Partial. Last 3 digits were 487. Marcus's voice was tense. "I've got Lisa and the kid staying with her mother tonight just to be safe." "Smart move," Amara replied, mentally adding this intimidation attempt to her growing file. "I'll run the partial plate. If they come back or approach you, call me immediately." Back at headquarters, Amara devoted her afternoon to reviewing body camera footage from excessive force complaints filed in the past year. What she discovered was disturbing. In multiple instances, footage had been edited or partially deleted. The digital timestamps showed clear discrepancies, with crucial moments of citizen interactions mysteriously missing. Maya Williams, the department's technology specialist and Officer Tanya Williams' sister, confirmed Amara's suspicions after examining the metadata. "These files have definitely been tampered with," Maya confirmed, pointing to irregularities in the code. "Someone with administrator access has been selectively removing sections. The system log should show who, but..." She typed a series of commands, then frowned. "The logs for those dates have been purged too." "Can you recover any of the deleted footage?" Amara asked. Maya hesitated. "Maybe if I go directly to the server backups. But whoever did this would see that I've accessed those files." "Do it anyway," Amara decided. "But use my authorization code. If there's blowback, it comes to me, not you." That evening, Amara received an urgent call from Mayor Wilson requesting an immediate meeting at City Hall. When she arrived, she found Wilson looking uncharacteristically nervous, accompanied by 2 council members known to have close ties to the police union. "Chief Johnson," Wilson began awkwardly, "Councilman Parker and Diaz have raised some concerns about your approach to departmental changes." Councilman Parker, a florid-faced man with expensive cufflinks, leaned forward. "We're hearing disturbing reports about plummeting morale and officers considering mass resignations. The union is threatening a vote of no confidence." "After less than 2 weeks?" Amara asked with calculated calm. "That seems premature." "Your suspension of Officer Bennett has created significant division," Councilman Diaz added. "Perhaps a more collaborative approach would be advisable." Amara studied the 3 men. "Gentlemen, I was hired to implement reforms in a department with documented patterns of racial disparities in enforcement. I'm proceeding exactly as outlined in my proposal, which the council approved unanimously." "Circumstances change," Parker replied smoothly. "We're not suggesting abandoning reforms, merely adjusting the timeline and approach. Officer Bennett assaulted a civilian for exercising constitutional rights," Amara stated firmly. "That he didn't know the civilian was me is irrelevant. Any officer under my command who behaves similarly will face the same consequences." The meeting continued for another tense hour, with thinly veiled suggestions that Amara should build consensus before proceeding further, effectively giving veto power to the very officers resistant to change. As Amara drove home that night, she noticed a vehicle following her, maintaining a consistent distance through several turns. She executed a series of counter-surveillance maneuvers, eventually confirming her suspicion when the unmarked police cruiser abandoned its pursuit. The partial plate matched the one Marcus had reported. The next morning, Detective Roberts arrived at her office with news that confirmed the escalating tactics against her allies. "Officers supporting your reforms are being isolated," he reported. "Shift schedules are being manipulated to separate them from potential allies. Some have found their lockers vandalized, nothing blatant, just enough to send a message." "And Bennett? He's become a cause célèbre in certain circles," Roberts replied. "Miller has organized a legal defense fund for him that's raised over $50,000. They're preparing a wrongful suspension lawsuit." By Friday, Amara faced her most direct challenge yet. A coordinated blue flu sick-out left the department critically understaffed, with nearly 40% of officers calling in sick simultaneously, primarily those aligned with the old guard. When Amara called an emergency meeting with the remaining officers, she found unexpected support. Community activists had gotten wind of the sick-out and organized volunteer citizen patrols in affected neighborhoods. Several retired officers had called offering to temporarily assist with administrative functions to free up active officers for patrol. "They're trying to prove the department can't function under your leadership," Tanya Williams observed during the meeting. "But they've miscalculated. The community is watching, and many citizens are finally feeling heard." As Amara implemented contingency staffing plans, Maya Williams arrived with a breakthrough regarding the deleted body camera footage. "I recovered segments from 3 incidents," she reported, showing Amara her findings. "All involving Bennett and all contradicting his official reports." The recovered footage showed Bennett escalating situations that could have been resolved peacefully. using excessive force against minority citizens who had shown no aggression, and in one disturbing instance, planting evidence during a search, while his partner deliberately looked away. This is enough to justify his termination and possibly criminal charges, Amara noted. Who was his partner in the third video? Officer Gregory Winters, Maya replied. He's Deputy Chief Thomas's nephew. The pieces were beginning to connect. Amara secured the evidence in her personal encrypted files, recognizing its explosive potential. As she worked late that evening finalizing her strategy for addressing the sick-out and the recovered evidence, a message arrived from an anonymous number. Parking garage level 3. 10 minutes. Come alone. Every instinct warned of a potential trap, but the message style matched her previous anonymous tipster. Amara took precautions, activating the recording feature on her phone, ensuring her location services were active, and carrying her service weapon. She also sent her current location to both her brother and Detective Roberts, with instructions to call for assistance if they didn't hear from her within 30 minutes. The parking garage was dimly lit and mostly empty at that hour. Amara positioned herself with visibility in all directions, back against a concrete pillar. At precisely the 10-minute mark, Curtis Miller emerged from between parked cars. "Surprised to see me, Chief?" he asked, staying beyond arm's reach. "Not particularly," Amara replied evenly. "Though I'm curious why the union representative is sending anonymous texts instead of requesting a meeting through official channels." Miller glanced around nervously. "Some conversations need to happen off the record. You're making powerful enemies, Johnson, not just in the department. Is that why you're here? To deliver threats?" "To deliver reality," Miller countered. Bennett was following established protocols that have been approved by the department for years. You can't change the rules overnight and punish officers for following what they were trained to do. "Those protocols violate constitutional rights," Amara stated. "And we both know Bennett's actions went far beyond any official protocol." Miller stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You think you understand how things work here, but you don't. This goes beyond the department. Judge Morris, who signed off on all those questionable warrants, his brother-in-law is on the city council, the district attorney who declined to prosecute excessive force cases, golf buddies with our biggest donors. The system protects itself." "Systems can be dismantled," Amara replied calmly. "That's precisely why I'm here." Miller's laugh held no humor. "You still don't get it. This isn't just about policing. It's about property values and business investments and tax bases. Certain neighborhoods get over-policed and others get protection because that's what maintains the economic status quo. You think the power brokers in this city will let you threaten that arrangement?" "I'm not asking permission, Miller." His expression hardened. "Then you'll fail, one way or another. Bennett has friends willing to go further than you can imagine to protect the system. The old guard isn't just a few disgruntled officers. It's judges, prosecutors, council members, business leaders. They've already decided you're a problem that needs solving. Is that a threat?" "It's a warning," Miller replied, already backing away. "For old time's sake." Amara's eyes narrowed. "What does that mean?" But Miller had already disappeared between cars, leaving Amara with more questions than answers and the distinct impression that Miller knew more about her than his position should allow. 3 weeks into her tenure as police chief, Amara sat alone in her apartment reviewing encrypted files on her laptop. The circles under her eyes testified to consecutive nights with minimal sleep. Her dining table had become a command center. Case files, statistical analyses, and personnel records arranged in meticulous order. Her phone rang, her sister Kiana, calling for the 3rd time that day. Amara hesitated before answering. "You can't keep ignoring my calls," Kiana began. Without preamble, "Marcus told me about the police car watching his house. Now I've had one too, and I have children, Amara." Amara closed her eyes, guilt washing over her. "I'm sorry. I've requested increased patrols near both your homes, but from officers I trust." "That's not enough," Kiana's voice cracked. "Whatever you're doing, whatever crusade you're on, it's not worth putting your family at risk. Please, just resign. Go back to the FBI where you had a whole agency behind you." The plea hit Amara harder than any threat could have. "I can't." "Walk away, Kiana. Not now." "Why not?" "Because of what happened to Marcus 20 years ago." "He's moved on, Amara. Why can't you?" "Because nothing's changed," Amara replied, an edge entering her voice. "The same systems that allowed Marcus to be assaulted for existing while Black are still operating. The same officers are still being protected. The same communities are still suffering. And you're going to fix all that by yourself?" Kiana asked, exhaustion evident in her tone. "At what cost? What happens when these intimidation tactics escalate beyond parked cars and threatening notes?" The question hung between them, unanswerable. After the call ended, Amara sat motionless, memories washing over her. Marcus at 17, his face bruised from police batons, trying to explain to their mother that he hadn't resisted, hadn't done anything wrong. The officers laughing outside the hospital room, secure in the knowledge that their report claiming Marcus had attacked them would be accepted without question. The family's complaint disappearing into administrative black holes, while medical bills mounted. Amara had made a promise then, to her brother, to herself, to every person who'd faced similar injustice. That promise had driven her through college, through the FBI Academy, through 15 years of methodically building the expertise and credibility needed to create systemic change. A sharp knock interrupted her thoughts. She approached her door, cautiously, service weapon in hand, and checked the peephole to find Detective Roberts looking uncharacteristically agitated. "I shouldn't be here," he said once she'd let him in and secured the door. "But you need to know. They're building a case against you." "Who's they?" "Internal Affairs at Deputy Chief Thomas's direction. They're claiming you've been selectively targeting officers based on personal bias rather than conduct." Amara absorbed this information calmly. They would need evidence for such claims. "They're creating it," Roberts explained grimly. "Doctoring complaint statistics, manipulating body camera footage to create misleading narratives. Thomas has connections in the state attorney's office who are prepared to open an investigation into your abuse of authority." "I've documented everything meticulously," Amara replied. "Any investigation based on fabricated evidence will ultimately fail." "You're assuming a fair process," Roberts countered. "Thomas and his allies control which evidence reaches investigators. They've been doing this for years, building cases against officers who challenge the status quo, while protecting those who maintain it." After Roberts left, Amara found herself staring at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. The woman looking back at her appeared composed, determined, but the slight tightness around her eyes revealed the strain of constant vigilance. For the first time, she allowed herself to consider what Kiana had suggested. Resignation would eliminate the threats to her family. She could return to the FBI, work within federal oversight systems with more institutional support. The personal cost of continuing this fight was mounting by the day. Her phone chimed with a message from Maya Williams. "Check your email, urgent." The attached files contained recovered fragments of emails between Deputy Chief Thomas and several judges, discussing how to handle problematic cases involving department personnel. One name appeared repeatedly in reference to historical cases, Victor Landon, described as a resource for sensitive matters. A quick search revealed Landon as a prominent Westlake businessman, owner of several local media outlets, and a major donor to political campaigns across the ideological spectrum. His name had appeared in Amara's background research on Westlake's power structure, but without any direct connections to the police department. The next morning, Amara received a call from her former FBI supervisor, Special Agent Diana Chen. "I just got a strange request for information about you," Chen said without preamble. "Someone's pulling strings to get access to your old case files, particularly the Brooks County corruption investigation." Amara frowned. The Brooks County case had been her most controversial, exposing collusion between law enforcement and local business interests that had ultimately led to the imprisonment of a sheriff and 2 county commissioners. "Who's asking?" "Request came through official channels, but I traced it back to a law firm representing Victor Landon. Name ring any bells?" "It's starting to," Amara replied. "They're looking for ammunition." "Watch your back, Amara. This has All the hallmarks of a coordinated campaign to discredit you. They'll use anything they can find: personal relationships, past cases, financial records, standard character assassination playbook. Later that day, a local news site published a story questioning Amara's handling of the Brooks County case, citing unnamed sources, claiming she had pursued personal vendettas rather than evidence-based investigations. The article carried the byline of a reporter employed by one of Landon's media companies. By week's end, similar stories had appeared across multiple platforms, each adding new unsubstantiated allegations about Amara's FBI career. Social media accounts with minimal history suddenly became active, amplifying these narratives and adding racist and sexist commentary. The pressure was building on multiple fronts when Detective Roberts called with news that shattered Amara's already fragile sense of security. "I've been attacked," he stated, his voice strained with pain. "Parking, garage level 2, 3 men in masks. They knew exactly who I was, said to tell you this is what happens to race traders who help diversity hires." Amara rushed to Westlake Memorial Hospital, finding Roberts with broken ribs, a fractured orbital socket, and defensive wounds on his hands and arms. His wife sat beside his bed, her expression alternating between fear and fury. "He was supposed to retire next year," Mrs. Roberts said quietly when Amara entered. 30 years on the force, never a single complaint. Then you come along with your reforms and suddenly my husband isn't safe from his own colleagues. The accusation stung, but Amara couldn't deny the causality. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Roberts. I never wanted anyone to get hurt." "But you knew they would, didn't you?" the woman pressed. "You knew what kind of department you were walking into. You knew there would be resistance. Did you think it would just be angry emails and union grievances?" Roberts raised a hand weakly. "Karen, please, this isn't her fault." "Isn't it?" his wife countered. "She could have implemented changes gradually, built trust first. Instead, she came in swinging an axe and now you're paying the price." The conversation haunted Amara as she drove home that night. Had her approach been too aggressive? Should she have moved more slowly, built more internal support before challenging entrenched powers? The questions cycled through her mind, alongside the image of Roberts in that hospital bed, targeted because he had chosen to support her reforms. At home, she found another envelope under her door, this one containing photographs of her entering and exiting her apartment, walking to her car, meeting Roberts at the coffee shop. The implied message was clear: "We're watching everything you do, everyone you talk to." For the first time since arriving in Westlake, Amara allowed herself a moment of genuine doubt. The opposition was more extensive and better organized than she had anticipated. They controlled local media narratives, had infiltrated state-level investigative bodies, and had demonstrated willingness to use violence against her allies. As she contemplated her dwindling options, her phone rang, an unknown number. "Chief Johnson?" a young male voice asked when she answered. "Speaking. This is Officer Michael Torres. I'm assigned to Records Division now, but I was Officer Bennett's partner for 3 months last year before requesting a transfer. I have information you need to hear, but not over the phone. Can we meet somewhere safe?" Amara's instincts warned of a potential trap, but Torres was one of the few Latino officers in the department. If genuine, his perspective could be valuable. The community center on Oak Street, 1 hour, public place, plenty of witnesses. Torres arrived looking nervously over his shoulder, his off-duty clothes a stark contrast to the polished officer Amara had briefly noticed in the records room. They sat in a corner of the center's coffee shop, Torres positioning himself to watch the entrance. "Bennett isn't just a racist cop," Torres began quietly. "He's the enforcer for a system that goes beyond the department. During my time with him, I saw him receive calls from Judge Harris, Councilman Parker, and Victor Landon directly. After those calls, we'd conduct special assignments, selective enforcement in certain neighborhoods, targeted harassment of specific individuals, evidence collection that didn't follow protocol." Amara listened intently as Torres outlined patterns she'd already begun to detect. A coordinated system using selective policing to protect certain interests while suppressing others, all along racial and economic lines. "Why are you telling me this now?" she asked when he'd finished. Torres glanced down. My cousin was one of Bennett's victims 3 years ago. Planted evidence, excessive force, the whole package. The case was dismissed when the body camera footage mysteriously vanished. I joined the force thinking I could change things from within, but he shook his head. After what happened to Detective Roberts, I realized there are real consequences to standing by silently. As Torres departed, Amara noticed a familiar vehicle in the parking lot, one of the unmarked cruisers that had been conducting surveillance on her family members. The intimidation was escalating from observation to apparent intervention in her investigation. Back in her apartment, Amara faced the most difficult decision of her career. The evidence she'd gathered pointed to corruption far beyond individual officers, a systemic network connecting law enforcement, judiciary, and business interests. Dismantling such a network would require resources and authority beyond what she currently commanded as a municipal police chief. Her phone chimed with yet another concerning message, this one from Maya Williams. "They've discovered I'm helping you. Computer access revoked. Under investigation for unauthorized system access. Be careful. They're closing ranks. Do you think Amara should stay and fight despite the mounting personal costs, or resign to protect herself and her allies? Comment number 1 if you believe she should continue her battle against this corrupt system, or number 2 if you think the cost is becoming too high. Like this video if you've ever had to make a difficult choice between personal safety and fighting for what's right, and subscribe to see how Amara handles these escalating threats. The stakes are higher than ever. Will she find a way to expose the truth before the old guard destroys her reputation and career? Stay tuned as the conspiracy unravels. Amara made her decision at 2:37 a.m. after hours of wrestling with doubts and contingencies. She would neither resign nor retreat, but she would change tactics. Fighting this battle solely within the confines of the Westlake Police Department had proven increasingly dangerous and ineffective. It was time to broaden the battlefield. She began by establishing a secure communication network outside department systems. Using encrypted messaging apps and burner phones purchased with cash, she created connections between trusted allies: Detective Roberts, now recovering at home; Maya Williams, officially suspended but still willing to help; Officer Torres; and Tanya Williams. Her apartment became a makeshift command center, with evidence secured in multiple locations rather than a single vulnerable point. She installed additional security measures: cameras covering all approaches to her door, window sensors, and a reinforced lock system. By dawn, she had drafted a comprehensive investigative strategy focusing on following financial connections rather than just departmental misconduct. If Victor Landon was indeed the power behind the old guard, his influence would leave financial footprints that could be traced and documented. Amara reached out to trusted contacts from her FBI days, including forensic accountants and intelligence analysts who owed her favors from past collaborations. While they couldn't officially involve the Bureau without formal authorization, they could provide guidance and technical assistance under the radar. Her first breakthrough came from cross-referencing property records with police incident reports. Neighborhoods with properties owned by Landon's various shell companies showed patterns of selective enforcement, aggressive policing of minority residents coinciding with property devaluation, followed by bulk purchases by Landon's investment groups. It was a sophisticated gentrification scheme using police power as the primary tool. Further investigation revealed financial connections between Bennett, Miller, and Landon's businesses. Bennett's modest police salary somehow supported a vacation property and boat that should have been well beyond his means. Miller's wife had been given a high-paying position at one of Landon's media companies despite lacking relevant qualifications. Judge Martinez provided crucial assistance, granting Amara access to sealed court records that revealed a pattern of judicial decisions protecting the scheme: selective enforcement of code violations, disproportionate sentencing for minor offenses in targeted neighborhoods, and expedited eviction proceedings against specific demographic groups. "This has been happening for years," Martinez confided during a secure meeting. "I've tried raising concerns through official channels, but judges who push back find themselves isolated, their rulings overturned, their reputations questioned. Amara's investigation uncovered a sophisticated racket targeting minorities for excessive fines and civil asset forfeiture. These financial penalties created impossible burdens for affected families, forcing property sales at below-market values, properties then acquired through Landon's network of companies. A key breakthrough came when Bennett's former partner, from early in his career, now retired and living in Arizona, contacted Amara through Maya Williams's secure channel. The ex-officer, James Donnelly, had maintained records of his own, including recorded conversations that implicated Bennett in evidence tampering and excessive force dating back 15 years. "I should have come forward sooner," Donnelly admitted, during their video call. But Bennett made it clear what happened to officers who broke the blue wall of silence. "I had a family to protect." With Donnelly's evidence and Maya's technical expertise recovering deleted body camera footage, Amara began assembling a comprehensive case file documenting patterns of misconduct and corruption spanning 2 decades. The evidence pointed to a complex system where racial bias wasn't merely personal prejudice, but a tool deliberately deployed for financial gain. As her investigation deepened, Amara discovered something unexpected: indications that Mayor Wilson had known more about the corruption than he had admitted. Financial records showed his campaign had received substantial contributions from Landon-controlled entities, while city development projects frequently benefited Landon's business interests in ways that seemed more than coincidental. Detective Roberts, though still recovering from his injuries, contributed crucial insights from his decades in the department. "Thomas has been the operational manager," he explained during a secure meeting at his home. "But the strategic direction always came from outside. Landon's fingerprints are all over department policy, especially regarding enforcement priorities and resource allocation." Amara's task force identified additional officers involved in the misconduct. At least 8 current members of the force appeared to be active participants in the scheme, receiving financial benefits for their cooperation. Dozens more had participated passively by looking the other way, or following directives without questioning their legitimacy. The investigation reached a critical juncture when Maya Williams, working remotely with equipment Amara had secured, outside department channels, discovered that Bennett and Miller had begun communicating through encrypted channels similar to those Amara's team was using. Their communications indicated awareness that they were under scrutiny. "They're planning something," Maya warned during a secure call. Bennett mentioned cleaning house and removing liabilities. "I can't access the full messages, but the snippets I've captured suggest they're worried about potential witnesses coming forward." The warning was timely. That evening, Amara learned that the department's evidence storage facility had experienced a system malfunction, with surveillance cameras failing for 3 hours. An inventory check revealed that several key evidence, boxes connected to cases involving Bennett, had been accessed, their contents potentially compromised. The next day, Amara narrowly escaped what appeared to be an accidental vehicle malfunction when her brakes suddenly failed while descending a steep hill. Her defensive driving training allowed her to navigate to safety using the emergency brake, but mechanical inspection later confirmed the brake lines had been deliberately damaged in a way designed to appear as normal wear. The escalation to potentially lethal tactics confirmed Amara's assessment. Bennett, Miller, and their allies recognized the existential threat her investigation posed and were growing desperate. Rather than deterring her, the attempt reinforced her determination to complete her case and bring it to appropriate authorities. Through a secure FBI contact, Amara arranged a confidential meeting with federal prosecutors specializing in police corruption and civil rights violations. The meeting, held at a federal building in a neighboring county to avoid detection, allowed her to present the core elements of her investigation. "This goes beyond individual misconduct," she explained to the assembled federal officials. "It's a coordinated criminal enterprise using racial bias as a tool for financial gain, with tentacles extending into local government, judiciary, and business interests." The lead federal prosecutor, a seasoned veteran named Catherine Oakes, reviewed the preliminary evidence with careful attention. "You've established concerning patterns," she acknowledged, "but prosecuting police corruption at this scale requires airtight evidence and unimpeachable witnesses. Many of your sources are vulnerable to character assassination or intimidation." "I'm aware," Amara replied. That's why I need federal resources and protections to secure testimony and documentation before Bennett and his allies can destroy additional evidence or silence witnesses. Oakes considered this. I can't launch a formal investigation based solely on this preliminary evidence, but I can assign resources to help develop the case further. If you can secure direct testimony from Bennett or Miller implicating themselves and others, particularly regarding the financial aspects, we would have grounds for RICO charges against the entire network. The meeting concluded with a tentative agreement. Amara would continue gathering evidence while federal resources would be positioned to move quickly when sufficient cause was established. In the meantime, her investigation would remain confidential to avoid tipping off targets. As Amara departed the federal building, she received an urgent message from Officer Torres. Bennett returning to duty tomorrow. Thomas overruled your suspension using emergency staffing provisions. Official reinstatement ceremony scheduled for 0900. The development was concerning but not entirely unexpected. Amara had anticipated that the old guard would eventually find a way to circumvent her authority regarding Bennett. What surprised her was the timing. Reinstating Bennett, now when tensions were already high, seemed unnecessarily provocative, unless provocation was precisely the point. It's a trap, Detective Roberts concluded when Amara consulted him that evening. They're hoping you'll object publicly, create a confrontation they can use to justify removing you. If you challenge the reinstatement directly, they'll claim you're undermining department morale during a staffing crisis. Amara nodded thoughtfully. So instead of fighting the reinstatement, we use it. Bennett back on duty means back on body cameras, back generating documentation, back making mistakes we can capture. It's risky, Roberts warned. He's dangerous, especially now that he feels emboldened. All the more reason to keep him where we can monitor him, Amara replied. Tell Torres to stay close to the situation but maintain his cover. We need to know what Bennett does in his first days back. That night, Amara updated her secure files and distributed key evidence to multiple trusted locations. Something about Bennett's reinstatement suggested a tipping point was approaching, a moment when the conflict between reform and resistance would reach its inevitable climax. The morning of Bennett's reinstatement dawned with an artificial calm that Amara recognized as the stillness before a storm. She arrived at headquarters early, composing herself for what promised to be a pivotal day. Deputy Chief Thomas had orchestrated the reinstatement ceremony as a clear challenge to her authority, scheduling it in the main briefing room, inviting local media, arranging for Miller and other union representatives to be prominently featured. The message was unmistakable. Bennett's return represented a victory over Amara's reform agenda. Amara chose to attend rather than boycott, maintaining a professional demeanor while carefully documenting which officers expressed enthusiastic support for Bennett versus those who appeared merely compliant. Thomas publicly cited urgent staffing needs and Officer Bennett's exemplary prior service as justifications for overriding her suspension order, never directly criticizing her decision, but implying its illegitimacy. Bennett himself projected confident triumph, accepting his badge and service weapon with a satisfaction he made little effort to conceal. When required to make brief remarks, he spoke of his vindication and commitment to traditional policing values, while glancing pointedly in Amara's direction. Throughout the ceremony, Amara noted Miller moving through the assembled officers, speaking quietly to specific individuals, seemingly distributing instructions or coordinating something. Beyond the public event, her instincts honed through years of investigating corrupt organizations registered a familiar pattern: preparation for coordinated action. Her suspicions were confirmed when Officer Torres managed a brief, seemingly casual conversation with her while officers dispersed following the ceremony. "Something's happening," he murmured while pretending to ask about routine paperwork. Miller's mobilizing trusted officers for some kind of operation this afternoon. Mentioned securing sensitive materials and contingency protocols. Bennett seemed agitated, checking his phone constantly. Amara returned to her office, immediately messaging her secure team about the development. Maya Williams responded first, reporting unusual activity in the department's computer systems. Large file transfers, account access patterns suggesting hurried collection of documents. They know we're building a case, Roberts concluded, when Amara updated him. They're destroying evidence before federal investigators can secure it. The assessment aligned with everything Amara had observed. She contacted Prosecutor Oakes, requesting emergency federal intervention to secure department records, but was informed that without specific evidence of crimes in progress, such intervention would require warrants that would take hours, if not days, to obtain. By mid-afternoon, Amara had confirmed that files were disappearing from multiple department systems: complaint records, personnel files, body camera archives, all showing signs of systematic purging. What she hadn't anticipated was how quickly Bennett would escalate from defensive measures to aggressive confrontation. The first indication came when dispatch reported an unusual cluster of officers converging on headquarters despite not being scheduled for duty. Within 30 minutes, Amara observed marked and unmarked vehicles establishing positions around the building's perimeter, ostensibly routine security, but effectively controlling access points. Officer Torres managed to send a brief encrypted message. Bennett received warning. Documents being secured now. Plans to arrest Roberts for evidence tampering. Claims authorization from state-level officials. The pieces suddenly clicked into place. Bennett and his allies weren't simply destroying evidence. They were preparing to neutralize key witnesses and seize control of the investigation narrative. By arresting Roberts on fabricated charges, they could discredit his testimony and potentially access his secured evidence. Amara initiated her contingency plan, alerting federal contacts while instructing her trusted officers to secure their positions without revealing their allegiance. She needed to prevent Bennett from taking control of the building while avoiding a direct confrontation that could endanger civilian staff. The situation escalated when Miller, apparently warned of Amara's countermeasures, alerted Bennett that their operation had been compromised. Bennett's response was immediate and extreme, securing the records room and taking 3 administrative staff members hostage, including Detective Roberts, who had arrived to collect case files. Chief Johnson, Bennett's voice came through the building's intercom system, artificially calm. I've secured individuals involved in a conspiracy to falsify department records. I'm requesting your presence in the records room to discuss resolution options. Come alone and unarmed. The demand created precisely the high-stakes standoff Bennett's allies needed, a crisis situation that would justify emergency intervention by state officials sympathetic to the old guard. If Amara refused to negotiate, Bennett could claim she was abandoning hostages. If she complied with his demands, she would be vulnerable to whatever scenario he had prepared. Instead, Amara implemented crisis response protocols while simultaneously contacting Judge Martinez to secure emergency warrants based on the hostage situation. Within minutes, she had legal authorization to access all communications between Bennett, Miller, and their associates, providing the legal foundation federal authorities needed to intervene. As tactical units established a perimeter, Amara opened a direct communication channel with Bennett. Officer Bennett, this is Chief Johnson. Release the hostages immediately. This situation can still be resolved without further charges against you. Bennett's laugh carried through the speaker. Further charges? That's amusing coming from someone about to be arrested for evidence tampering and abuse of authority. Check your email, Chief. The State Attorney General has authorized your removal pending investigation. This building and all its contents are now under state jurisdiction. Amara had anticipated this move. The old guard using political connections to supersede her authority. What Bennett couldn't know was that federal jurisdiction trumped state intervention when civil rights violations were involved. I'm entering the building to discuss terms, Amara announced, both to Bennett and to the tactical commander coordinating response units. She proceeded carefully, wearing body armor and carrying her service weapon despite Bennett's demand that she come unarmed. Officer Williams and 3 trusted officers accompanied her to the records room floor, taking positions to secure evacuation routes for hostages once released. Outside the records room, Amara addressed Bennett through the closed door. I'm here, as requested. Let's discuss terms for releasing the civilians. Enter alone, Bennett called back. Weapon on the floor, hands visible. I'll keep my weapon holstered but not relinquished, Amara countered. The civilians must be released before any substantive discussion. After a tense silence, Bennett replied, "Send in your credentials first, under the door." Amara slid her badge under the door, using the moment to signal Officer Williams to prepare for tactical entry if necessary. Seconds later, the door opened, just enough for Bennett to verify her presence. "Hands where I can see them," he ordered, a pistol visible in his grip. Nice and slow, Amara entered with deliberate caution, quickly assessing the situation. Detective Roberts and 2 administrative assistants sat against the far wall, hands zip-tied before them. Roberts had a fresh bruise forming under his right eye but appeared otherwise unharmed. Bennett stood between Amara and the hostages while Miller worked frantically at a computer terminal, apparently deleting files. "This won't end how you think, Bennett," Amara stated calmly, keeping her hands visible but her stance prepared for action. "Federal authorities have already been notified. The building is surrounded. By the time they get warrants, there won't be anything left to find," Miller replied without looking up from the computer. "We've been preparing contingencies for months." Bennett gestured with his weapon for Amara to move further from the door. "You think you understand what's happening here, but you've barely scratched the surface. This isn't just about a few bad cops or racist policies." "I know about Landon," Amara replied, watching Bennett's expression carefully. "The property scheme, the selective enforcement, the kickbacks. I know how deep this goes. The judges, the council members, the financial networks." Something flickered in Bennett's eyes, surprised that she had connected those dots. "Then you understand why you can't win," he stated. "This system existed before you arrived, and will continue long after you're gone. People like us are just frontline soldiers. The generals give the orders from country clubs and corporate boardrooms." Amara took a calculated risk. "You're expendable to them, Bennett. When federal charges come down, do you think Landon and his political allies will protect you, or will you be the sacrificial lamb to preserve the bigger system?" Bennett's jaw tightened. "Landon assured us we'd be protected. The same way he protected Officers Jenkins and Morales when they faced excessive force charges 3 years ago." Amara pressed. "They took plea deals and prison time while Landon walked away clean. You're making the same mistake they did, trusting that loyalty flows both ways in a corrupt system." Miller looked up sharply. "Don't listen to her, Ray. She's trying to turn us against each other." But Amara could see her words finding purchase in Bennett's expression. "I have the financial records, Bennett. Your accounts receiving payments through shell companies, property transfers, the offshore arrangements. When this breaks open, you'll face not just civil rights charges but money laundering, conspiracy, possibly RICO violations. That's federal time, not some minimum security state facility." For the first time, uncertainty crept into Bennett's demeanor. "What's your point?" "Cooperation has value," Amara stated simply. "The first person to provide substantive evidence against higher-level players always gets the best deal." Miller abandoned the computer terminal, moving toward Bennett. "She's bluffing. There's no evidence connecting us to—" "There's evidence connecting everyone," Amara interrupted. "Maya Williams recovered the deleted body camera footage. Judge Martinez provided sealed court records. Torres documented your coordination with Landon's security team. Officer Donnelly supplied recordings from years ago that established the pattern." Bennett's weapon wavered slightly as he processed this information. Amara could see the calculations happening behind his eyes, years of self-preservation instincts warring with misplaced loyalty. "Release the hostages," Amara continued, her voice level. "Provide testimony about who gave the orders, who coordinated, the financial arrangements, who protected officers engaged in misconduct. That's your only path to a reduced sentence." Miller moved closer to Bennett, his voice urgent. "She's manipulating you. Once the state attorney's warrant arrives, she'll be the one in custody. We just need to hold position for another 20 minutes." Bennett's tension was visibly escalating, his weapon shifting between Amara and the door as conflicting impulses battled for dominance. Outside, tactical units would be preparing for breach if hostages weren't released soon. Amara recognized the critical moment, Bennett teetering between surrender and desperate escalation. She needed to create an opportunity for hostage extraction without triggering a violent response. "Your case file is on my desk, Bennett," she said, gesturing toward the door. "The recommendation for termination, the evidence for criminal charges. One copy. I can get it right now if you want to review it before deciding." It was a calculated distraction. As Bennett's attention divided between Amara and the implied file outside, she subtly signaled to Roberts, who had managed to loosen his restraints during the conversation. "No tricks," Bennett warned, gesturing with his weapon. "Miller, watch them. I'll check the hallway." As Bennett moved toward the door, his attention momentarily diverted, Amara executed the coordinated extraction plan. Roberts lunged forward, tackling Miller away from the computer terminal, while Amara drew her weapon in a smooth motion, directing it at Bennett. "Drop your weapon!" she commanded. "On the ground now!" Bennett froze momentarily, then made a critical error, swinging his weapon back toward Amara rather than surrendering. The movement triggered the breach protocol, with tactical officers bursting through the door behind him. In the chaos that followed, Bennett fired a single wild shot before being subdued by the entry team. The bullet struck a filing cabinet, sending paper fragments flying but injuring no one. Within seconds, Bennett was disarmed and restrained while additional officers secured Miller and evacuated the hostages. As Bennett was led away, his expression shifted from defiance to desperation. "Wait," he called to Amara. "You said cooperation has value. I want to talk." "We'll discuss terms at the federal building," Amara replied. "I think you'll find U.S. attorneys very interested in what you have to say about Victor Landon and his network." With the immediate crisis resolved, Amara supervised the securing of the records room as a crime scene. Federal technicians were already arriving, prepared to document and preserve the electronic and physical evidence Bennett and Miller had attempted to destroy. Detective Roberts approached, rubbing his wrists where the zip ties had left marks. Bennett was desperate. "Whatever you've uncovered must be significant enough to terrify Landon and his allies. Significant enough that they were willing to risk a hostage situation to destroy it," Amara agreed, "which tells us exactly how vulnerable they believe themselves to be." The following hours unfolded rapidly, with federal agents securing department records while Amara coordinated with Prosecutor Oakes to process Bennett's increasingly desperate offers of cooperation. As the immediate crisis response wound down, Amara found a moment of quiet to contact her brother. "We've got Bennett in custody," she informed him. "He's already naming names, trying to save himself. Landon, Thomas, 2 judges, several council members. The whole network is starting to unravel." "Are you safe?" Marcus asked, his primary concern evident. "Safe for now," Amara replied honestly. "With federal authorities involved and Bennett cooperating, the immediate threats are neutralized. But this is just the beginning of a much longer process." By nightfall, news of the hostage situation and subsequent arrests had dominated local media, with national outlets beginning to pick up elements of the larger corruption story. Amara watched from her office as federal agents carried box after box of evidence to secure transport vehicles, knowing that each document represented another piece of the system she had vowed to dismantle. Mayor Wilson arrived looking ashen, his earlier confidence replaced by nervous apprehension. "This is bigger than I understood," he admitted, standing uncertainly in her doorway. "Did you know about Landon's property scheme?" Amara asked directly. Wilson hesitated, then nodded slightly. "Not the full extent. I knew he had influence in the department, that certain neighborhoods received different policing approaches. I thought it was just politics as usual, not this. Criminal conspiracy affecting thousands of citizens' lives isn't politics as usual," Amara replied coolly. "The federal investigation will determine your level of involvement." As Wilson departed, Amara turned her attention to the evidence Bennett had provided during his initial interrogation. His desperate attempt to secure leniency had yielded a detailed account of how the corrupt system functioned, from street-level enforcement targeting specific demographics to judicial processes ensuring those targets faced maximum consequences, all coordinated to benefit Landon's business interests. Bennett's final words before being transferred to federal custody had been revealing in their simplicity. "I didn't start this system, I just enforced it, because that's what the job required." The statement encapsulated the challenge Amara had faced from the beginning. Corruption so normalized it was indistinguishable from standard procedure to those operating within it. Changing such a system would require more than removing individual bad actors. It demanded fundamental restructuring of the institutions themselves. As midnight approached, Amara stood at her office window watching federal agents continue their methodical collection of evidence. The department she had been hired to reform now stood partially dismantled, its corrupt foundations exposed to public scrutiny. The real work, rebuilding something better from those ruins, still lay ahead. 6 months after Bennett's arrest, Amara sat before the newly established Civilian Oversight Commission, presenting the quarterly progress report on departmental reforms. The meeting room, once a seldom-used conference space in City Hall, now bustled with community representatives, reformed officers, and media observers documenting the transformation of Westlake's police department. As indicated in Section 3 of your reports, Amara explained, gesturing to the projected statistics, use of force incidents have decreased 63% compared to the same period last year. Civilian complaints are down 47%, while successful case clearance rates have increased by 22%. Jamal Washington, the commission's chair and longtime community activist, leaned forward. And these improvements are consistent across all neighborhoods? No. Disparities based on demographics or income levels? The data is disaggregated by neighborhood, income level, and demographics on page 12, Amara replied. While some statistical variations remain, the extreme disparities previously documented have been significantly reduced. We're continuously refining deployment strategies to address remaining inconsistencies. The transformation had been neither quick nor easy. The federal investigation sparked by Bennett's cooperation had expanded far beyond initial expectations, ultimately including 28 indictments across multiple institutions, police officers, judges, prosecutors, council members, and business figures including Victor Landon himself. Bennett, despite his cooperation, faced multiple federal charges carrying significant prison time. His testimony had proved invaluable, however, in unraveling the complex web of corruption that had operated for decades. In exchange for this cooperation, prosecutors had agreed not to pursue the maximum possible sentences. Curtis Miller had proven less cooperative, maintaining loyalty to the system that had employed him even as evidence of his complicity mounted. His trial was scheduled for the following month, with prosecutors confident in securing convictions on multiple conspiracy charges. Deputy Chief Thomas had attempted to flee when federal indictments were announced, making it as far as the Canadian border before being apprehended. His case had become a centerpiece of the federal prosecution, revealing how department procedures had been systematically manipulated to enable profitable discrimination. The most significant consequences had fallen on Victor Landon, whose financial empire began crumbling as investigations revealed the full extent of his corrupt business practices. Properties acquired through his discriminatory scheme faced civil forfeiture, with proceeds designated for community restoration funds benefiting the neighborhoods most affected by his predatory practices. For victims of the corrupt system, justice had been delayed, but not ultimately denied. Under Amara's direction, the department had established a civil rights restoration unit specifically tasked with reviewing cases where misconduct or bias may have influenced outcomes. To date, over 300 convictions had been vacated, with formal apologies and compensation provided to those wrongfully targeted. As Amara concluded her presentation to the Oversight Commission, a familiar face appeared at the back of the room, her brother Marcus, attending a department meeting for the first time since her appointment. His presence represented a personal milestone in her journey, an acknowledgement that the changes she had promised were finally taking tangible form. After the meeting, they walked together through Westlake Park, where community engagement officers were hosting a youth sports program as part of the department's reformed outreach strategy. "Remember when you first told me you were taking this job?" Marcus asked, watching children playing basketball with uniformed officers. "I thought you were crazy, taking on an entire corrupt system single-handedly." Amara smiled. Not single-handedly, as it turned out. Change was possible because people like Roberts, Torres, and the Williams sisters were already there. waiting for leadership that would support them in doing what they knew was right. Still, Marcus observed, there were moments I was certain you'd fail, when they were watching our houses, threatening your allies, trying to discredit you through the media. Most people would have backed down. I nearly did, Amara admitted. The night Roberts was attacked, I seriously considered resignation. The cost seemed too high. What changed your mind? Amara paused, watching a young black boy receive patient instruction from Officer Torres on proper basketball technique. I realized that backing down wouldn't actually protect anyone. The system would continue harming people whether I was there fighting it or not. The only real protection was dismantling it entirely. Later that afternoon, Amara visited the county courthouse where Judge Martinez was presiding over a case involving a young man who, under the previous system, would likely have faced excessive charges and disproportionate sentencing. Instead, he was being considered for a community intervention program designed to address underlying issues while keeping him connected to support systems. The courtroom itself had been transformed, not physically, but in procedure and spirit. Court officers maintained professional demeanor regardless of defendants' race or economic status. Translators were readily available for non-English speakers. Public defenders received adequate time and resources to represent their clients effectively. Judge Martinez acknowledged Amara with a subtle nod as she observed from the back of the courtroom. They had become unlikely allies in the reform process, with Martinez providing crucial judicial support for changing how cases were processed and defendants treated. The most profound transformation, however, was occurring within the police department itself. The headquarters building remained the same aging structure, but its interior culture had been fundamentally altered. New recruitment efforts had increased diversity among cadets. Training programs now emphasized de-escalation and community partnership rather than force and control. Promotion criteria had been redesigned to reward constitutional policing and problem-solving rather than arrest numbers. Detective Roberts, now Lieutenant Roberts, headed the newly established Accountability Division, ensuring departmental practices aligned with reformed policies. His experience as both a veteran officer and a victim of the old system's retaliation made him uniquely qualified to bridge divides between reform advocates and traditionalists who remained skeptical. Maya Williams had been promoted to lead a specialized unit focused on ensuring technology served accountability rather than concealment. Her technical expertise had proven invaluable in recovering evidence during the investigation and now guided implementation of systems designed for transparency. As afternoon transitioned to evening, Amara made her final stop of the day, the courthouse where Bennett had first confronted her, unknowingly assaulting his future chief. The building stood as a physical reminder of how her journey in Westlake had begun and how far the community had come since that confrontation. Inside, a sentencing hearing was concluding. Raymond Bennett, in prison jumpsuit and restraints, receiving his federal sentence for civil rights violations, conspiracy, and financial crimes. The judge, a federal appointee untainted by Westlake's corrupt networks, delivered a 15-year sentence with the possibility of reduction based on continued cooperation. Bennett, once the embodiment of untouchable authority within the department, now appeared diminished, a mid-level enforcer facing consequences while still struggling to comprehend how thoroughly the system he had served had abandoned him. As he was led from the courtroom, Bennett's gaze met Amara's briefly. There was no dramatic confrontation, no final exchange of words, just a moment of recognition. The officer who had once handcuffed her for observing court, now himself, stood, convicted, while she represented the reformed institution he had fought to preserve in its corrupted state. 6 weeks later, Amara presided over a graduation ceremony for the department's newest officers. The first class recruited, selected, and trained entirely under the reformed standards. Their diverse faces reflected the communities they would serve. Their training emphasized constitutional rights and equitable enforcement, and their oath specifically included commitments to equal protection and procedural justice. Among the graduates was Michael Chen, a young officer who had approached Amara during the academy with a story that captured the department's evolution. His father, a Chinese immigrant who had opened a restaurant in a predominantly black neighborhood, had faced harassment from Westlake officers under the old regime, selective enforcement of code violations, excessive fines, intimidation tactics designed to force him from a location Landon's development companies coveted. "My father told me not to trust police," Chen had explained during their first conversation. "But when I saw what you were doing, here, creating accountability, demanding justice, I thought maybe I could help build something worth trusting." As Chen and his fellow graduates received their badges, Amara reflected on the distance traveled and the journey still ahead. Transforming institutions was never complete. Reform required constant vigilance against the human tendency to preserve power and advantage. The systems Bennett and Landon had exploited hadn't emerged overnight, and neither would their replacements. What had changed fundamentally was the community's relationship with those institutions. Civilian oversight, transparent processes, and meaningful consequences for misconduct had shifted the balance of power. Where citizens once felt helpless against systemic discrimination, they now possessed mechanisms for holding officials accountable. In her closing remarks to the graduates, Amara emphasized this ongoing responsibility. "The badge you receive today represents not authority over the community, but accountability to it. Your success will be measured not by arrests made or tickets issued, but by justice delivered and trust maintained. The department you join is still evolving, still learning from past failures while building toward a more equitable future." After the ceremony, Amara met briefly with community leaders who had been instrumental in supporting reforms despite initial skepticism. Their willingness to give the process a chance had proven crucial when resistance was at its strongest. 6 months ago, I wouldn't have believed this possible, admitted Reverend Jackson, who had organized some of the earliest protests against department practices. Seeing Bennett in that courtroom, facing consequences for what he did to so many in our community, that was a moment I never thought would come. "The work isn't finished," Amara reminded him. "Systems have momentum. Without continued community engagement, old patterns can reemerge in new forms. That's why we're still here," the Reverend replied with a smile. "Watching, participating, holding everyone accountable, including you." As evening fell, Amara returned to her office for a final review of the day's events. The space had been transformed from a fortress-like command center to a transparent workspace with glass walls and open scheduling. The symbolic change reflected her broader philosophy: policing should not happen behind closed doors, invisible to those most affected by its decisions. On her desk sat a framed photograph taken 20 years earlier. Her brother Marcus in his hospital bed after his encounter with police, his face bruised but his expression determined. The image had traveled with her through her FBI career, and now served as a daily reminder of her purpose in Westlake. Beside it lay a second frame, newer, a departmental commendation recognizing her leadership during the corruption investigation, signed by officers from across divisions and ranks. The dual images represented both her motivation and her achievement, the personal injury that had launched her career, and the institutional healing she had helped facilitate. As she prepared to leave, Detective Roberts appeared in her doorway. "Thought you might want to see this," he said, offering a printout of arrest statistics for the quarter. "First time in department history the numbers show no significant racial disparities. Arrests correlate to reported crime rates rather than population demographics." Amara studied the document, allowing herself a moment of satisfaction. "Progress," she observed simply. "Real progress," Roberts agreed. "Not just cosmetic changes or lip service. Fundamental transformation of how we operate and who we serve." As they walked together toward the exit, Amara reflected on the journey that had brought her to Westlake and the confrontation that had accelerated her reform agenda. Bennett's prejudice, so deeply ingrained he couldn't recognize its influence on his actions, had embodied the challenge she faced. Not merely changing policies, but transforming cultural assumptions about who deserved protection and who warranted suspicion. Outside headquarters, twilight had fallen over Westlake. In neighborhoods that had once feared police presence, community patrols now included civilian partners working alongside officers. Where brutal enforcement had once traumatized residents, problem-solving partnerships now addressed root causes of disorder. The city wasn't perfect, no city ever is, but its institutions now strive toward justice, rather than preserving inequity. Amara's phone chimed with a message from her sister Kiana. a dinner invitation celebrating Marcus's new position heading a community oversight training program for neighboring jurisdictions. The family that had once urged her to abandon this dangerous mission now participated in extending its impact beyond Westlake's borders. As she drove through the city toward her family, Amara passed the courthouse where everything had begun, where Bennett's assumption about what a black woman could or should be had collided with the reality of who she was. The building stood as a monument to both injustice and its remedy, a reminder that systems created by human choices could be unmade by human determination. What do you think is the most important factor in creating lasting change in systems with deep-rooted problems, like racial bias? Is it strong leadership from people like Amara, community involvement and oversight, or legal consequences for those who abuse their power? Comment below with your thoughts. If this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories about justice and transformation. Share this video with someone who needs to understand how systemic change happens, one courageous decision at a time. Thank you for joining us on Amara's journey from victim to champion of justice. Amara's story teaches us that true change requires more than just replacing individuals within broken systems. Transformation demands both courageous leadership and community engagement. When institutions protect discrimination, reform must address structural issues, not just bad apples. The most powerful lesson is that accountability creates justice. Amara succeeded not by working alone, but by building alliances across divides and documenting patterns that couldn't be dismissed as isolated incidents. She recognized that systems protect themselves through intimidation, isolation, and misinformation, tactics that can only be overcome through persistence and evidence. We also learn that personal experiences often drive the deepest commitment to change. Amara's motivation stemmed from her brother's mistreatment, demonstrating how injustice creates its own opposition. The most effective reformers understand both the technical aspects of institutions and the human costs of their failures. Perhaps most importantly, Amara's story reminds us that justice isn't achieved in a single moment, but through sustained vigilance. When prejudice is embedded in institutions, transformation requires continuous effort from both leaders and communities working together toward a shared vision of equality. What has been your experience with institutional change? Do you believe systems can truly transform, or will bias always find new expressions? Comment below with your thoughts. If this story moved you, please like and subscribe to support more content exploring justice and transformation. Share this video with someone who needs inspiration for creating change in their own community. Together, we can turn painful experiences into powerful progress.